notice the turtle. Notice the turtles and the fish, you know, red fish, blue fish, Yertle the turtle, and so on. These are recurring characters throughout his career. And one of the cutest things I think about this is the title of this particular drawing. It's called After Dark in the Park. And again, that's from 1933. And inside this particular issue, it's Ye Knights of Ye Round Table, or Table Round. And notice how he signs this. It's Dr. Theophorus Seuss. And he would always come up, not only as little poems or ditties, but his name would change, his signature would change, and so on. It's some really clever, beautiful artwork. This is 1934, the cover of a Life magazine. And notice at the bottom right, you see the National Recovery Act, trying to come out of the Depression here in the United States. But these are beautiful full color illustrations, and I suspect he was paid quite well for doing these. This is something that's quite unique. These were the Thomas J. Murphy Calendar Company out of Iowa. Would produce calendars with all sorts of artwork. And this particular calendar featured Dr. Seuss's characters, kind of like zoo characters, if you will. You notice the antelope and the birds. You saw that on one of the covers from the Judge magazine. These are original proofs from the manufacturer of the calendar. Pretty hard to find. That's why they're in this kind of bluish and white color. And this is just an example of the Thomas J. Murphy Company. Can you imagine that giant printing facility to basically produce calendars and other commercial artwork for companies to use to advertise? This is one of my favorite illustrations. This comes out of a 1930s issue of the New York Women magazine. And it's highlighting Columbia's Medical Center, Columbia Hospital in New York City. You see kind of a modern building with the wispy clouds, but I'm not sure how well this would go over today, but it is pretty cute. You got a waiting tent and his version of what a maternity ward looks like. You see the antelope in the bottom right there, his character, and of course the little babies with the feathers, and the stork carrying the baby up on top the flag over the delivery tent. I don't know if you've seen these kinds of things before. This is a one of two full-page Sunday comics that we have. Seuss did this comic called Hije, and it ran literally for only a few months in 1935. It wasn't well received. It's kind of an Arabian Nights sort of motif, if you will. And again, very, very hard to find. Very few people even know of this. Clever cartoon, but again, not well received. I think there was maybe 3 months is all it ran. He was also got into the beer business a little bit. And he created this illustration for Schaefer Bock beer. And it's pretty hard to find. It's there's a magazine, I think out on eBay now, that has a black and white full page illustration like this. But it's pretty costly, and as long as I have this one, I was pretty happy with this. But the one I really love is Narragansett from Rhode Island, the brewery up there, and he did this Chief Gansett illustration, and this is an original beer tray and a couple of coasters. On the backside, of course, it advertises Narragansett, that bars and restaurants would have all over their facilities. One of these, I gave a talk to a Texas group down at the, I can't remember the official name, it was a Catfish Parlor off of 290 on the way to the airport, or 71, I think. And they actually had one of these nailed to the wall with like 100 other beer trays. And it was funny. I mean, they ruined it, but nonetheless, it's the only one I've seen actually in use in a restaurant in modern times. He went on and worked and did tremendous amount of work in the 1930s for Esso. And as I mentioned earlier, it was Esso Marine Products, Esso Lubrication Products. And he did things both for consumers and for the Esso dealer network. And the glass that you see on the side, we have several different iterations of that. These were gas station giveaways. And of course, you notice the Seuss Navy. And they had a really big advertising campaign, both for dealers and for consumers regarding that. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Meet Gus, that's a pin that would have been given at a gas station. It's got an SO paper on the back. And the Secrets of the Deep, Volume 2, we have tremendous amounts of material like this. That was an SO dealer magazine, acquainting them with different products and what have you. Now, the ashtray that you've seen there, that's the Nuzzle Puss. And notice he's got an admiral's hat, this little seal. And that's the name, and it's an ashtray for the Seuss Navy. And I suspect these were utilized at dealer meetings, the annual dealer meetings for the SO dealers. If you had achieved some level of success selling SO products, you would have been made an admiral of the Seuss Navy. And what I really like on the two particular certificates that we have here, they're pretty hard to find. Notice the orange seal on the bottom left. So that was a gum seal that would have been stuck on there. And the joke is it's a seal on a seal. And you can see it's the same little image from the Nuzzle Puss that appears on the ashtray. And this is how they would have been sent out. Notice it says the Seuss Navy headquarters, 26 Broadway in New York. And one of the nice things about 26 Broadway, I had my very first job was in Manhattan, my commercial job in Manhattan. It was located at 26 Broadway, but I never saw any Seuss stuff there, but it was way after this, I suspect. One of the most fun gas station giveaways that you could see from Dr. Seuss at ESSO is this puzzle. I forget how many pieces it is, but it would have come unassembled in this bag. It's a large brown paper bag. And notice in the puzzle, it has this Esso lube, lubricating oil for your automobile. And you notice also the Seuss characters here, and one of them has the crank, for starting your car back then, or a crankshaft, some part of your vehicle. And these were guys that were after to make your car not run well. And of course, Essolube would solve all these problems. And the envelope's really cute, great Seuss design. But what I really like is on the back side, on the top right, he gives a name to all of the characters that you see in the puzzle. And notice that he even tells you that the bottom one is the motorist, his wife, and child. So he had so much fun doing this. With his explanations and his artwork, and people just loved it. These are pretty hard to find and a little pricey. There's a couple of them pop up from time to time. These from the 1930s, these are original full-page color ads from the New York Times. And I've not seen any of these other than the three. Not saying they're not out there, but I haven't seen them in the years of my collecting. Really wonderful color ads, and the same kind of characters you would see in the puzzle, a little bit different. The one with the polar bear looking one in the top right. But notice in the middle one, you see in the bottom left corner, that's the Marx brothers. Groucho Marx is there. So even in this Esso Lube ad, you notice that they're advertising the Marx brothers. This is a really interesting full-page spread from one of the yachting magazines of which he appeared in with Esso marine ads all the time. And it's a fun thing with lots of characters and lots of humor in there. And again, it's Esso Marine oil and oils and greases. Now this picture, although this particular item is not in our collection, I borrowed this from the web. It says it's the annual maneuvers of the Seuss Navy. So this is 9 months before the beginning of World War II, which was September 1st with the Nazis, the Germans invading Poland. So this is January, the middle of January of 1939, the Hotel Astor in New York City. And you notice on Broadway, so it's probably very close to the Seuss headquarters there. Notice the hats that everyone is wearing here. Also notice I was not able to spot a single woman in the room. So these hats, the one that you see on the right is from our collection, is only the third one I've ever seen. And I was not going to lose the third auction. So I paid more than it's probably worth, but to me it was worth a lot. And it's really great. Notice the nautical type bill on the hat. It's made out of kind of a cardboardy material and some cheap cotton. amazing any of these survived, but it's really cute that they all were wearing those at their luncheon. This is another interesting piece. This is an Esso dealer mailer that was mailed to New York. It's not a date because it was a postage paid pre-posted label on there. But notice that it is 1941. I'm sorry, it's February of 41. We're not in the war yet. And notice the Seuss cartoon on the left-hand panel there, the right side of the left panel. And it's kind of fun. His work appeared everywhere for Esso, and I can't imagine what he was paid by them, because it was really a very significant campaign. Lisa, I left this one in here for you. It's the Seuss Navy Office of the Admiralty Board. You see the address on there. And this is postmarked December of 1939. So the war in Europe has already begun. This is a front only of a piece of mail. I have never seen one of these corner covers other than this one. And it was sent with a receiving cancel to Grove City, Pennsylvania. Kind of interesting. It only took 3 days. Mail now is kind of even first class mail is longer than that today. And what's really interesting, this is the letter that was with that. And it's addressed to Harry Eaton. That's the only part that I saw that's literally typed on there. It looks like everything else, including the Seuss signature, but it says Admiral-in-Chief and cartographer. I can't even pronounce the other word there. So it was always something fun. And Esso advertising for their marine products again. These were the kind of cards that when he worked for Esso would be sent out. This one, I'm not sure the date. I have another one that was dated 1947. These are 1940s, and Esso dealers would receive these cards and send these out. This one is from Maryland. We have a number of these from different cities and states around the country, just simply to get people to bring their car in for their service. Just a friendly reminder, perhaps what we might use on email today for your car service. These are 2 of 3 originals that we had purchased that we have since sold off. I wasn't using them in exhibits, but it's rather interesting. I bought these from Mr. Jackson's daughter up in Massachusetts as a private sale. And Jackson himself sent a note off to Dr. Seuss in 1981, trying to get some provenance on these particular drawings. And these were done, all 3, you'll see the other one in a moment, were done to advertise Esso's Flit insecticide product. And you can see in the drawing on the bottom left, you can see off in the right-hand side, it says Flit. You see one of those pump sprayers. Some of you might even remember that. It was basically DDT in a can, and it was used to get rid of flies and mainly mosquitoes. And it was interesting that the letter says that he believes these drawings that were originally owned by this guy named Cleves that worked for McCann Erickson, the advertising company that had the Esso account. So it's rather interesting. It's interesting artwork. Now notice also in the 1930s where he dates it to that, notice in the bottom one, you're starting to see a military flair to his artwork, even for something like Flit insecticide. This was the 3rd one that we had owned, and you see the Flit container there. Does anyone remember in the Godfather movie when right when Marlon Brando dies in his tomato patch, when his grandson's running around with that Flit insecticide thing dripping it all over Marlon Brando? I always laugh wondering whether that's really what killed him versus the heart attack. But anyway, this is a poster we have. And again, note the tagline on this was "Quick Henry, the Flit." That was a really important item. Seuss did not do the can. When you see that soldier on the can there, that was not his artwork. That was done years prior to Seuss getting involved with Esso. But I would like you to pay special attention to the mosquito. And that really plays into some of his World War II things that we'll see in a little while. He also did work for GE, their Mazda lamp division. They made light bulbs. This was just a cute little ad that I was able to pick up somewhere, cut from a magazine, but it's really hard to find it. I don't think he did a lot for them. And again, these are pretty pretty iffy to, if you're able to locate one, you're lucky. Yertle the Turtle was one of his kids' books that came out, but Yertle the Turtle, and you know, you saw these turtle images early, even in the early 1930s on the magazine covers. But Yertle the Turtle had some real serious undertones, if you were, of World War II. The large turtle was supposed to be fascism, i.e. Hitler and Nazi Germany. And the smaller turtles that the bigger turtle was taking over were all the little countries, whether it be you know, Austria and Czechoslovakia and Poland and so on throughout and the Low Countries all over Europe. So anyway, but even prior to the book, he was using turtles in political cartoons like you see on the left, where it says you can't build a substantial V out of turtles if you have dawdling producers. And of course, the V, we all know, is the V for victory. So these were the kinds of things that would come out, and you would see his artwork appearing in all sorts of publications, now more involved with support for the war and supporting the war effort. This is a cover that I cropped down so you could really see the image. This is a cover of PM Daily newspaper in New York City. And this would be from the late 1930s. And notice that the appeaser, guys like Charles Lindbergh, what's his name, from Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of the UK, and so many people, some were just anti-war, some were very pro-Nazi, pro-fascist, and what have you. This was a common theme among many of the political cartoonists of the day, to that these showing the appeasers, you know, giving somebody a lollipop and they'll go away. And here you have the Nazi sea monsters, of course, with the swastikas all over them, just waiting to eat them alive. Remember, one more lollipop and then they'll all go home. Obviously, not a very good philosophy in that particular time period. This was another one also from PM, and it says set a bird in the midst of a blitz, and that's the blitz of the of England, the Luftwaffe of the Nazis bombing London. Up to now, they've scored very few hits, and you can see it's kind of a little ditty poem he did with the spelling. So I sit on my canny old star-spangled fanny, and on it he sits and he sits. And again, something against, we really can't afford, you know, to be sitting here as the world is blowing up around us. What happens is he continues his quest with the anti-Roosevelt bug, guys like Colonel McCormick of the Chicago Tribune newspaper, really serious isolationist, and so on. That he just kept on trying to get people aware of what they were doing was wrong. This is another one from 1942, and you know, showing what Americans were doing, chasing selfish pleasures instead of actually going after the Axis powers, you know, from a military standpoint. But this is one of my favorites. I have the original paper with this in it, but I cropped it so you could see it. Notice the date of this, December 8th, 1941. And that is one day after the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, as we all know. And it says the war, and he never knew what hit him. It's quite a chilling political cartoon. As he was trying to get everybody and calling out the isolationists. Well, here's the net result of it. Now, this particular is one of the two original Dr. Seuss drawings. This is quite large, actually, that we've maintained for our collection because they do end up in museum exhibits and what have you. And this is a it also appears in the book, Dr. Seuss Goes to War, that I think came out in 1999. It's quite a good book if you're interested in that kind of talking about his artwork. much like what we're talking about here. But this one, this guy Kudhe was an American ambassador. His name was John Kudhe, and had held different ambassador positions around Europe up until and including the war. And here's Hitler selling him a bill of goods. You see the, pardon me, the little Hitler cherubs at the top, Germania, representing truth, plenty, labor, peace, and law. And everything that obviously the Nazis and the fascists were not. Yeah, but again, selling the Americans, or trying to sell the Americans, a bill of goods here. And in the book, you can see the little tag that was on there that was pulled off. It actually, Kudhe's name was John. It says, there you go, Johnny. Try to sell that to the suckers in America or in the USA. That's what the little tag actually said. Just as a matter of information, this letter is not in our collection, but I thought it was interesting that in 1975, this guy writes a letter and gets a reply back from Seuss. And he's talking about the cartoons that were running in PM magazine, PM daily newspaper, were selling for $175 a pop. Oh my gosh, what a steal that would have been. These things today, if you see them on heritage auctions up in Dallas and so on, thousands of dollars, his artwork today, as you can imagine. Some of you may know or remember in school this wonderful poem by Joyce Kilmer called Trees. And without reading the entire poem, it's just a beautiful thing about nature and the beauty of nature and so on. And it's the last line says, the second to the last, upon whose bosom snow has lain, talking about the tree who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Well, Seuss took it to a new level, and he shows Adolf Hitler with a rope and a noose. And of course, if you may not know, that is Pierre Laval, the head of the collaborating French government that was a pro-Nazi fascist government. Pierre Laval was one of the two leaders of that. The other guy was Marshal Pétain. And Laval was actually hung after the war. But this cartoon, I don't have the original artwork, but this is the original cut from the newspaper, from the original newspaper. Only God can make a tree to furnish sport for you and me. So the fascists take this poem to a whole new level, and you'll notice that those are all Jewish people of the Jewish faith being hung. And that's what the fascists and the Germans and the French during the war thought the trees were quite a sporting event. Other types of things that he did for PM and other publications, serving Roast Adolf by Joseph Stalin. Notice the utensils in his hand are a hammer and sickle. Obviously the symbols, the iconic symbols of the Communist Party. This is another one. This is a rather interesting one. So that's Jacques Doriot, illustrated as a rat in a cage being pulled out of the sewers of Paris by Hitler himself. And Doriot, it's very interesting, the history of this guy. He was actually a communist to begin with, got disillusioned with it. They got disillusioned with him, and he became an ardent fascist, anti-Jewish guy. And interestingly enough, his demise was I think it was in March of 1945, I believe. He was in a car in France and was strafed by an Allied aircraft and killed at that point. So that story has kind of an interesting, what I'll call a happy ending. This is another cartoon going married exactly 1 year today. Seuss, he picked on the Japanese, the Germans, a little bit on the Italians, but he had a field day. And this was a 1943, I believe, or 1942, the copyright at the bottom there. That's supposed to be Emperor Hirohito as a woman in drag, I guess, with Hitler, but they were married, the marriage of Japan and Germany. Two of the Axis powers, and the resultant of that marriage was a child named Hashimura Frankenstein. And it's I mean, I guess you couldn't get more racist than that, but it's a rather interesting cartoon. And notice that the child has an axe as a toy. This is another interesting one. He goes, now what in the blazes am I going to be using for Jews? And if for those of you who may not know about Hitler's Mein Kampf that he wrote while he was in prison in Germany in the 1920s, he had already outlined well before 1933 when he came to power in Mein Kampf the extermination of the Jewish people. And you notice this thing that says your old pal Adolf is a little inscribed painting in the back there, a picture in the back. And this is Tojo, the head of the Japanese military and the guy that really kind of tremendous atrocities throughout Asia. When I lectured in Harbin, China at the Japanese Unit 731 Criminal Evidence Museum about the Holocaust, that's where the Japanese did their biological and chemical warfare experiments against the Chinese civilian population. It's unbelievable what the Japanese did. And but anyway, the Japanese really didn't have a lot of Jewish people living around, so that's the kind of humor, if you will, in the thing. What is he going to use for Jews? We have a large collection of Japanese, they're called Jap hunting licenses, actually, is what many of them say. This is one that shows two of Dr. Seuss's illustrations, a Tojo and a snake in the grass illustration that were used quite heavily for promoting in the sale of war bonds. And that ties back to his early days of World War I as a Boy Scout selling war bonds. During World War II, he was a real advocate and did tremendous amount of work for our Treasury Department to get people to contribute to the war effort, if you will. And this is just one of many different Japanese hunting licenses. It's the only one I have that has Seuss illustrations. But at the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., we have quite a number of artifacts on exhibit there. We have a very close relationship with them. And they have a exhibit that now has been extended to 2023, maybe January or February of 23. And it's America and the Holocaust. And if you have an opportunity even to view that on their website, it's really worthwhile. We have quite a number of things like this on exhibit there. This ties back, this is called the news map, to the mosquito we talked about earlier. And this is a very, very large, these things were all on exhibit at the National War of the Pacific in Fredericksburg, Texas, a few years ago. We had quite a large exhibit of American cartoonists there. And the other side of the big poster, it's really quite large, is a news map. And it would give news, it would tell you the how many weeks the war had been in effect, how many weeks America had been participating in the war, and covered all different subjects on different aspects of the fighting. And on the back of this one, this is there's a few of these floating around, but this is hard to find. This is Dr. Seuss's illustration, his map, and his mosquito called Anne that you see in the War Department booklet. This is Anne, she's dying to meet you. He illustrated the whole thing without any notation to his name. As I mentioned, he was a major during that period. So these are some really interesting things that he did. And these are anti-malaria type things because our troops stationed all over the world fighting all over malaria, and any kind of disease was a very, very significant issue. A beautiful large poster from our collection to buy war bonds. He created kind of a follow-on to something that was going on in Britain. They had the squander bug, but he created his own. And of course, squander bugs wasting dollars. Don't waste the dollars, buy war bonds. And these illustrations were used in many different types of things. You can see this is the Women's War Finance Committee, a little stapled booklet, if you will. It appeared there, it appeared inside the booklet, advertisements in PM Daily newspaper, and of course you see it in the center part of a centerfold from a different publication. And this is another one. This is a large banner poster. These are the kinds of things you'd see in schools and businesses, in manufacturing facilities. And I left this first day cover that was, the stamp is from a series of, I believe it was 13 countries that were overrun by the fascists. And in 1943 and 1944, the post office put out a series of each one of those countries' flags. And this particular one was postmarked in DC in 43. Someone had made a beautiful cachet of this particular poster, and I thought it was really nice. It was actually sent to McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh. Now, getting more into the war, Private Snafu was a black and white series of training films for U.S. Army soldiers. And some of the voice appearances you would recognize if we don't have time to do videos, audios of these, but Mel Blanc, Bugs Bunny fame, did many of the voiceovers along with quite a number of other famous people. And for those of you who don't know, SNAFU stands for Situation Normal All, and we're going to say fouled up today. But you can imagine what the thing was. And these were training films that were not viewed by the public. These were specifically for young troops, 18, 19-year-old kids that were drafted and going to be sent off to war. And it was about conspiring with the enemy, or how to take care of your weapon, and all sorts of basic things that made it fun for the troops to watch. The series was directed by Chuck Jones. You may know him. And as I mentioned, many of the voiceovers were done by Mel Blanc. But the most important part, and if you watch any of these films, you'll know that Dr. Seuss was the writer of many of these, because you'll see that Dr. Seuss little ditty kind of stuff. You'll just pick it up. You'll recognize it immediately. And these are all out on YouTube to check. Now, your job in Germany was for soldiers, but this came out literally a month or so before Victory in Europe Day. Knowing full well the war was going to be won by the Allies, and knowing full well that the occupation of Germany was going to be a very, very difficult thing. So this came out by the War Department, and it was an occupation film written by Geisel and Dr. Seuss, but he would use his name Geisel in these kinds of things. And it was he was under the commander of this unit was the famous director Frank Capra, for those of you who know that name of movie fame. But it was a very, very difficult film in the sense it took the Germans to a level of showing Germans all throughout history of being a warring people and not to be trusted, that the troops needed to be very, very careful. You couldn't fraternize with the enemy. You had to be careful with the kids and so on, because even they, with the Hitler Youth and the women's BDM movement and so on, very, very risky to deal with the Germans citizens during occupation. This came out shortly after, in 1945. Warner Brothers took that film and called it Hitler Lives for a general release. And you see the question mark. So it's Hitler Lives as a question, not as a statement. And this particular one, Jack Warner, the head of Warner Brothers, secured the rights for the movie and turned it into a short documentary. It was released commercially in December of 1945 and won the 1946 Academy Award for documentary short subject. And again, you know who the screenwriter was for that, was our friend Theodore Geisel. Our Job in Japan came out a little bit later. And this was the same sort of movie, but now for the occupation of Japan. Again, showing the Japanese as a warring people, how their kids were trained in schools, and taking it back centuries, much like they did with the Germans, into Germanic and Teutonic times, the same sort of concept. So this was another training film made a little bit after the war, and there's no credits were given for the titles, but Geisel, better known as Seuss, wrote the film, and a guy named Elmo Williams, that some people seem to know a lot more about than I do, edited it. Both men were working with Capra again on this particular film. And what's really interesting is after, much like you saw the Hitler Lives, they turned this one into another movie called Designed for Death. And this is a really scarce original poster from that movie. And this one won a documentary award, Academy Award winner in 1947. And again, this was the screenwriting was by Dr. Seuss. And almost anybody you would talk to about Seuss really has no conception of the types, the depth of what he did in screenwriting, you know, whether it be for Snafu or these propaganda films for our troops overseas. It really is amazing. And I wanted to show you some interesting things. We have two different posters. The other one is even larger than this, and it's in a couple of pieces, which I really just don't even need to get put together. I don't have no way to display it. But this one is framed. This is a poster that would have been outside a movie theater in one of those glass cases. It's quite large. And I blew up the bottom of the poster, including where you see the embossing over there. It says that the poster itself is the property of the National Screen Service Corporation, licensed for display in connection with the exhibition of this picture at your theater, and it must be returned immediately thereafter. They had a number. This one's number 48 of 704, copyright 1948. And please note at the second bar down, it says written for the screen by Theodore Geisel and his wife, Helen. That's his first wife. You can see the rest of it there, but he never got credit when they did. There was a lot of controversy over this when the Academy Award came out. I thought something you might be of interest, this aspect of Seuss. And again, this is what at the end of the film, you see the, this is for the War Department film. You see the Japanese writing kind of muted behind it, but you can see that it was written for the screen by Theodore Geisel, by Seuss and his wife, Helen. Now, kind of winding down here for time's sake, this is something I picked up rather recently. This is from 1956. He was long already a resident of La Jolla, and they asked him to do this. I assume it was pro bono work. La Jolla is a very wealthy, beautiful community. If you've not been there, it's really quite nice. And outside of Los Angeles in Southern California, and more down by San Diego. And it's really, this was a booklet that they put out, multi-page booklet. I just did a couple of things here for you that he illustrated for them to try to keep, what do you call it, the big signs, billboards out of the community. They thought it was really going to cheapen the overall appearance of the community. So he wouldn't sell this to me. He wanted this because he still had some of the booklets, I guess. But this was the advertisement that ran in the La Jolla paper, advertising just the signs of civilization, getting some press for what they were doing. And of course, it says the unconventional Dr. Seuss makes some pointed comments on signs and signs hangers in the pamphlet issued by the La Jolla Town Council. And this is my wife. For those of you who are Jewish or know anything about Jewish, one of the things, my wife loves this t-shirt I bought for her one time. That's my beautiful wife, Michelle, on the right there. One fish, two fish, red fish. And somebody had the clever creative ability to call it gefilte fish. And that's a kind of a unusual Jewish food, if you will. So a little humor there to wind down the seriousness. Art Spiegelman, who was a Holocaust survivor himself, wrote this about Dr. Seuss, and I thought it really sums up perhaps this presentation. Spiegelman, if you're familiar with his 2-volume books of pulp fiction, it's a cartoony, it's called Mouse. It's a Holocaust rendition that he came out with, a Pulitzer Prize winner, I might add. But his comment about Dr. Seuss during this period, it says these cartoons rail against isolationism, racism, and anti-Semitism, which is anti-Jewish, and a conviction and fervor lacking in most other American editorial pages of this period. They are virtually the only editorial cartoons outside the communist and black press that decried the military's Jim Crow policies and Charles Lindbergh's anti-Semitism. Dr. Seuss said he had no great causes or interest in social issues until Hitler. and explained that PM, the New York newspaper, was against people who pushed other people around. I like that. More of a humanist than an ideologue, one of those Groucho rather than Karl Marxist. Seuss made these drawings in the fire of honest indignation and anger that fuels all real political art. If they have a flaw, it's an absolutely endearing one. They're funny. And I think it really sums up another cartoonist that we have, Arthur Schick, the way they handled it. And as my beautiful wife, Michelle, always says, don't cry because it's over. I hope you all smile that it happened. And I would leave you that today you are you. That is truer than true. No one, there is no one alive that is youer than you. So any questions, I'd be delighted to answer those for you. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I hope if nothing else, you learned something today and perhaps had a little bit of lunchtime entertainment. Thank you. I see there's some things in the chat here that I was unable to see.
Hi, Greg. I have a question. The next time the Antiques Roadshow comes to Austin, I'll be interested in knowing what a small piece of your collection would be worth. Must be well above six figures.
Yeah, well, we have so many things on so many different artists and so on. It's we have you know, like official appraisers and you know, I mean, we've obviously it's all insured, so
yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, Steve. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Bill.
I just said it's a very amazing, interesting collection.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, Steve, you had a question?
Yes, wonderful presentation, Greg. And I got nothing but love for Utica. I'm a SUNY Binghamton alumnus, and we used to swim Utica College. So I know Utica, upstate New York.
Wow. Really. Well, my Aunt Phyllis is on here. She's a graduate of Syracuse and Utica College. Yep. And although I graduated from the University of Buffalo, Utica College is, you know, obviously a big part of our growing up there and so on. And my brother, my older brother, lives in Endicott. He retired as a high school teacher in the Vestal School District. He was a biology teacher for 40 some odd years.
Amazing. Yeah, we were just, my wife's from Buffalo. She graduated Syracuse. She's from East Aurora, New York. So we have friends from UB and Buff State also. But,
yeah, well, we used to hang out.
What I was going to ask is, in you know, Mulberry Street.
Wait, I can't. Was that you, Steve? I think you froze. Or am I frozen? Steve, are you still with us? Well, I see a bunch of other heads moving, so I assume, can anybody else hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, Greg.
Oh, good, good. Oh, there's Steve is back. Oh, muted, Steve. Steve, you're muted.
Yeah, you mentioned Buffalo and upstate New York, and the whole Zoom crashes. You see what kind of power there is? Funny. What I was going to ask is, in the new sort of, you know, the down Mulberry Street, or the book about Mulberry Street that was sort of removed from a lot of the collections and certainly the greater culture of Dr. Seuss. Are there dialogues about all of his patriotic work? Again, patriotic sort of coupled with the tenor of the times back then, when people certainly had a lot of visceral anger towards, you know, Germany, Japan, and a lot of the other, you know, Axis powers and sort of antagonists. I just wonder if this new generation is aware of all of his good works from that point of view.
No, I don't think so. And that's one of the reasons I really like giving this particular presentation, because I think it's really, really essential to understand that the guy really, and you saw the quote by Spiegelman, he wasn't a bigot, and a lot of these things, you know, I mean, listen, you also have to understand the times. when people lived, and you know, things change, and different values and mores. It's very difficult, and people really do need to know a much broader individual. And even if you look at the Butter Battle book, which is one that's not so well known by Dr. Seuss, I find that to be interesting, because that's really kind of a Cold War propaganda book, if you will. So if you look at some of his things, he didn't really end just at World War II. He went on and did have political overtones, but I try not to get in and make political comments in any of my presentations. So I'm going to kind of end it there. But in my mind, he did a masterful job in really bringing a lot of good things, in raising money for the war effort and supporting America during several different periods, from World War I through the Cold War.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to bring up the third rail. Leave it to a New Yorker to, you know, stir up the pot.
No, I think it's all valid, Steve. It's just, it's just, I prefer not to get too involved in those. If I'm
No, thank you.
Let's see, there's somebody with initial J on there that's waving. Hello. I don't know who it is, but do you know who the name is? It just says J on the name.
Gaylord, that's you.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Mark. I hate to go to something so basic, but that is a overwhelmingly impressive collection. How was it done?
Well, thank you. It's just one of many collections we have. And actually, you saw just a tiny part of our Dr. Seuss collection. I mean, there's only so much time and so many things you can put in. When you make presentations like this, it's really, you try to make certain key points, so you find elements of the different artifacts to accomplish that. But candidly, to answer your question, it's very difficult. There's online auctions like eBay, things, Lisa, like Del Camp, you know, the Belgian website that focuses a lot on stamp collecting. I just had some things that a friend of mine, as a matter of fact, if it's sitting here, I'll show you something really beautiful. A friend of mine in Poland found, and I don't know what I did with it. I'm sorry, it's not here. I have friends all over the world, collectors and otherwise, and we look out for each other. And if they see an auction in a different country that I can't bid on, we bid for each other. Some very, very rare things. So there's my own network. There's also the online auctions. There's also, I've bought a number of things from Heritage and different live auctions in England and France, you know, where you're just doing it either on the computer or on the phone as a participant. It's a really, really intense, I don't want to call it a hobby. It's more now a life work. It's very intense. It's there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of time and effort writing these things up, and even delivering these kinds of things to the general public. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our work, my wife and I have never accepted an honorarium. If people choose to offer something, we usually have it directed either as Colonel Mendelbaum knows, that we have it directed to our local chapter of the Jewish War Veterans, or to some sort of group to help people in need, whether it's a food bank or different things. So our mission is to get this information out to people, and we collect and do it. There's a wonderful video. We have a couple of things on exhibit at the Bullock Museum. We have a wonderful relationship with them. We've done some major exhibits. They made a 4-minute video about Michelle and I as collectors. And if you just type in Gregg Philipson on the Bullock website, which is the storyoftexas.com, yeah, it'll really answer any questions you have about why we do what we do.
Thank you very much. By the way, just while we're waiting, just one more quick question. It seemed as if an awful lot of the cartoons by Dr. Seuss occurred during the Depression. And was Dr. Seuss and his cartoons viewed as somewhat of relief from the despair of the Depression, or was the cartoon something that lasted throughout his career?
Yeah, candidly, I would have to answer that it was both, because some of his stuff was just plain fun, and you know, that was kind of his style anyway. So when you saw things like during the Depression and after, you know, Judge Magazine and Life and so on, it was fun and it was entertaining and something light for people. But I think also in some of the not so fun, if you will, or cutesy kind of, animal cartoons, I think one of the things that really political cartoonists do, the ones that are very successful, are use their images to take really serious topics, but add a little bit of humor where when you look at it, you almost get a little chuckle out of it. And I think Spiegelman spoke to that in his quote that he gave. So I think it's both. I mean, he was really a good man, and he was just a good guy that wanted people to be happy, I think, as evidenced by his children's books. Hi, Sid. Sid, unmute yourself, please.
Could you tell us about some of the other talks that you do and some of the other areas that you collect?
Well, yeah. So I've given give quite a, and one of my favorite ones is our propaganda one, mainly about World War II and before. But when I'm invited in normal years to the Normandy Scholars Program at UT, that's a subset. Kids have to be accepted to that, even though they're already in the history department. So we have propaganda. We have, I think I'm doing next week one on not just Dr. Seuss, but I have one on propaganda, pardon me. It's called Cartoonists on the Front Lines. And it's guys like Walt Disney and Reg Manning, Bill Malden, Pulitzer Prize winners. So that's another one. I have things on the Jews of the Confederacy. There's different artists, one named Arthur Schick. I mean, I have a whole list. I'd have to try to, it's quite extensive on all the different ones I've done, but there's a, let me see if I minimize this. Let me get my list out. Let me close this if I can. And while I'm looking for that and trying to, I speak on, actually, I should have thought of this. I used to speak monthly before the pandemic at Fort Hood on a number of things for their diversity program. So of course I did the Holocaust is one of our main, we have several different types of Holocaust presentations. On normal years, I speak, Judge Wisser knows that, I speak to thousands of Central Texas school kids every year about the Holocaust and so on. But at Fort Hood, I've done presentations on and exhibits also on for Martin Luther King's birthday, on women's history, and we try to focus it on the military, of course, but it covers a broad scope of women's history, Hispanic heritage, the Asia Pacific Islander type of things that we cover. So a myriad of subjects like that cover diversity. Let me take a look at this thing here. That's not the one I'm looking for. Discussion topics. I have a list here. Let's see. I've done them on liberation. I have one on total Jewish participation worldwide in World War I. I think Chuck Mendelbaum has seen that one. Prisoner of war camps, Texas prisoner of war camps, where we house tremendous numbers of Nazi POWs here. The closest one obviously being Camp Swift, just down in Bastrop. Oh my gosh, Civil War, Arthur Schick, all these different artists that we talk about, Jewish astronauts. I've got a great, great thing on Jewish magicians. Actually, I won an award for that. Jewish magicians of the 19th and 20th century. Let's see, women's history we talked about. I have one for scouting. For boys, for really more Cub Scouts than Boy Scouts, so that's a good one. Jewish astronauts, Jewish magicians, so many different military topics. I don't know, it just goes on and on. So I guess, and I can put things together, without too much hassle if somebody's got a specific topic that we might have material on. but we try to use the materials from our collection, for the exhibits.
Well, folks, I think it's time we need to wrap it up. This has been a fantastic, very fun, interesting, educational program.
No clap.
Thank you so very much. Before we close, Gaylord, did you want to tell us about your program? You have the program for next week, correct?
Yes,
Tell us briefly.
we will return to Austin and to talk about, frankly, and thank you, Mark, for putting up Dr. Desmore Walk's photo and her bio. She is the new Austin Travis County Medical Director and Health Authority, as the title goes. I guess for several times a day for the last 15 months, we've seen the Health Authority giving us updates on the virus and the pandemic, etc. She will bring us up to date on all the activities of the medical director, and particularly where we are on combating the virus, and also a new hallmark reached over the weekend. I think we're one of the few jurisdictions in the country that now have over 70% of the population that are eligible that have received at least one vaccination. She is a very talented, attractive, and articulate medical director, and I think it'll be a very informative program.
Thank you so very much. Well, I think it's time to close, unless somebody else has something pressing that we need to discuss. All right, well, I will see you next week. You understand we've got another good program. Thank you all for.
Yeah, Linda.
Yes.
Linda, excuse me, this is Rudy. I'm sorry to interrupt and delay things, but Ophelia Zapata indicated she's joining us today. She's one of our newer members, Austin AISD trustee, and I'm sure the end of school activities and graduations have kept her busy, but delighted that she's joining and wanted to shout out and give her a special welcome today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, we're excited about that too.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to send my love to my Aunt Phyllis.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody. I need to attend a 100th birthday party from one of our Jewish war veterans at 3 o'clock. So I need to run. Very nice to see everybody.
Who's that, Greg?
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much.
Bye, Colonel.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chuck, for a great program.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yes, yes.
He makes it easy. Are we adjourned?
We're adjourned. We're
Okay,
adjourned.
all right. I didn't know formally did we have, okay, awesome. Thank you again, guys. This was great.
It was fantastic. Yes.
Everybody done? I think I'll turn it off.
Yeah. Thanks.